Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So this is a menagerie of different stories, and it's like I think the title's going to be something like a week of something. I don't know what's going to be called, but this is what stories came in within a week, and it starts off with to do with the Houthi tribe, their drones being bombed by the UK and US and Europe, I don't know exactly who. So the escalation of the Hamas-Gaza war moving further afield, becoming more dangerous, and we thought that they couldn't be doing any more fighting. I don't know. It seems like it's never going to end, this idea of fighting each other, even though we're all human beings, over what? Bits of land and power and control and possession. So anyway, that talks about Iran as well, making these drones. Obviously the UK and the US and Europe make drones for other countries as well. This is another reason why war is so profitable for countries, that often set up these organisations like UN or peace treaties and all that kind of stuff, and yet are making billions in weapon sales so that they can have these proxy wars where they fight, because they're too scared to have wars against each other anymore, because they don't want these world wars. So now what they do is they have these little wars. It's almost like they're like an addiction, that they have to have wars. So now they have proxy wars where they get involved each side of an argument and then fight each other that way, like a chessboard. The big countries are the chess masters, and either side of the chess pieces are these little proxy countries. I mean, it's ridiculous, really, isn't it? Anyway, I've talked more about War and Pursuit of Truth before, so that goes into an interesting piece by Alex Rossi from Sky News, who I thought he explained a lot about proxy war, and I thought it was really interesting what he said about, I think that's to do with the UK and US strikes on Yemen to target the Houthi tribes. It is a bit worrying, because obviously Houthi tribes, they claim, are backed by Iran. They claim also Hamas is backed by Iran, so it's like this West versus Iran proxy war that's going on, and whether this will spill out because of what's going on in Gaza. And then it moves on to next. Oh, AI. There was an interesting piece about AI, about deepfake. It's interesting because, our lives are going to get a lot more difficult because of AI and how good it is at replicating real people and their voices. So they were talking about there's fake Rishi Sunak videos and you can't tell the difference. And of course now that brings into question everything anyone ever says anymore. Because before, in the past, we used to just be able to believe, seeing is believing, although that's not necessarily true, because we all see movies and we all see they're not real, and how with a lot of money you can make something look real, like Gravity, say, the film with Sandra Bullock, how, that looks so realistic. Or, all these war films that look like war's actually taking place, but it's actually actors and props and money. Whereas now, then, everything we see, are we going to know what's true and what's not? False flag on a massive scale with AI. Not to be, I'm not trying to make up something, I'm just saying that, that will be a difficulty. What's the next one? Is about Mr. Bates and the Postman. I've nearly watched all of that now. It seems so scandalous that it's taken 24 years from a computer system that had problems the first year in, and that these people were just telling, no, just carry on entering the figures, it'll be okay. But you see this a lot, where people don't really, and I've mentioned this before, want to address a problem. I don't understand that. If you've got a problem, then look at the problem. And, the people on the phone calls that were meant to be helping them should have been reporting this, maybe they did, upwards, to say, look, there's this problem, it doesn't make sense. But for the post office to carry on legal action against these people, and people, being bankrupt, having criminal charges, end up taking their own lives, when they must have been thinking, wait a minute, even though Fujitsu are telling us that this is foolproof, it doesn't quite make sense that all these people suddenly, they must have had data before about how many people had stolen, as sub-postmasters before, and how many since Horizon, and it must have been an amazingly massive jump. You expect all these people to be doing this over the years. But the ruthlessness, and that's why I think it was interesting to see this. It shows that, we often say that, oh no, we can believe people, we can, put our trust and all that. But it shows that human beings, when they've got an agenda, they can be so untrustable. And, stand in front of you and proclaim to be telling the truth and doing what's best for your interests or their interests. And yet could be doing the completely opposite. And it was interesting, though, talking about, this lady's talking about education, and a lot of what I've mentioned here about, if we want to change the world, then we have to start with at the early ages. I wonder whether Think Equal has anything about not seeing human beings as divided, not seeing land and possession and all these things and the system that causes all the problems, or whether it's just a band-aid and it's just working within the system, and that's not actually solving the problem. Because if you want to think equal, then you have to stop the division of humanity and of the place that we found ourselves upon and all the energy, and also get rid of money. But I bet it doesn't do any of those things. I guess that would be too radical. But you're not going to solve the problem then if you don't think about those things. And then the last one is about care homes. That's a shocking story about these people with dementia or Alzheimer's who are being mistreated and not looked after properly. And I just goes to show you that, in the West you think of, caring for people and all this kind of thing, and these poor people who are defenceless and are being ill-treated. It shows that as humanity we have a long way to go. Anyway, enjoy these clips. Please leave your comments. Take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.
A British warship has shot down drones that were launched as part of the biggest attack yet from Iranian-backed rebels in the Red Sea. The Defence Secretary said the weapons had been heading towards HMS Diamond after being fired by the Houthi militia group. In a statement this morning, Grant Shapps said, overnight, HMS Diamond, along with US warships, successfully repelled the largest attack from the Iranian-backed Houthis in the Red Sea to date. Deploying Sea Viper missiles and guns, Diamond destroyed multiple attack drones heading for her and commercial shipping in the area, with no injuries or damage sustained to Diamond or her crew. The UK, alongside allies, have previously made clear that these illegal attacks are completely unacceptable, and if continued, the Houthis will bear the consequences. We will take the action needed to protect innocent lives and the global economy. I'm joined now by our Security and Defence Editor, Deborah Haynes. Deborah, just how significant is this?
It's a really significant moment. It's the biggest intervention that we've seen from a British warship in their region since this mission started. You'll remember that the Iranian-backed Houthis have started firing on ships passing through the Red Sea in the wake of Israel's war in Gaza. But in response to that, the UK and the US and others have sent assets to the region. And at the beginning of the year, this pretty extraordinary statement was released by the UK, the US and other allies, basically putting the Houthis on notice and saying these illegal actions, this targeting of commercial shipping, needs to stop, or else the Houthis, which are they control parts of Yemen, will bear the consequences. That wasn't really spelt out, but clearly we've seen yesterday evening, this attack happened yesterday evening and was repelled overnight. There has been clearly a response, but the question really is now what happens next. Are the UK, the US and other allies, are they going to take steps to proactively launch strikes against Houthi targets inside Yemen? And that would be a major escalation.
Escalation has, of course, been a topic we've been discussing lots, and we'll keep focused on it. The other question is what weapons might be used, and your exclusive new attack drone developed by Iran for Russia's war in Ukraine. Talk us through that, and just a little bolt-on question to it. If it's developed by Iran, presumably it doesn't limit where it might be used, given these two conflicts at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. It's a real conflation of different events that are interlinked. We've obviously been talking a lot about the war in Gaza over the last 3 months, but the war in Ukraine, Russia's war in Ukraine, continues to rage on. And I've been told by a security source that Iran, which is closely aligned with Russia, has developed a new kind of drone. You'll know that Iranian drones, have been linked to a lot of attacks in Ukraine. Russia launches this combination of missiles and drones against Ukrainian military and civilian targets using these one-way attack drones that have been developed by Iran. The source told me that this new drone that's been made specifically for Russian use against Ukrainian targets has got more of a reconnaissance kind of element to it. It's got the ability to seek out, potentially, specific, even moving targets. So it's not like these one-way attack drones, the Shahed 136 and 132. This one is called the Shahed 107, and I was told it was part of a family of drones known as the Shahed 101, and that a number of these, a few units, have been offered to Russia for initially $2 million. And obviously the concern is that would grow. And one final point as well, I've been told by a number of different sources, and it's also been reported by the US media, that Iran and Russia are looking finally to finalise a deal that has long been feared, with Iran offering ballistic missiles to Russia, which again would be a very significant step and a real concern to Ukraine and its allies.
Deborah, as always, thanks so much, and well worth checking out Deborah's exclusive and their history. Well, the Houthis were originally founded during the 1990s to promote the rights of Shia Islamists in the face of Saudi Arabia's growing religious influence in Yemen. The Houthis are backed by Iran, allied with Hamas and Hezbollah, and oppose US and Israeli influence in the Middle East. Their slogan contains the words "Death to America" and "Death to Israel." The group was founded by Hussein al-Houthi, whose name was used by the fighters, but his death in 2004 resulted in a civil war in Yemen. Well, since then, they've gained territory and now control much of Yemen's western coast on the Red Sea, down to the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, where 12% of global shipping had previously, before all this passed. Well, our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, is now here with me. And Alex, let's just explore this a little bit more. So, who overall is in power in Yemen? Is it now the Houthis essentially that control things, or not? Is it a small part of the territory and the power base?
The northern part of the country, the western coast, the strategically important Red Sea coast, is controlled by the Houthis. And then you have other groups in the rest of the country. Now, there is a shaky ceasefire in place at the moment. There's negotiations on and off, peace process going on and off. But the interesting thing about the Houthis, and this is maybe why they've been used in the way that they are as part of the axis of resistance against what's going on in Gaza, is that they're not really accountable in the same way that a normal state would be. So they don't really have the responsibilities. They're not beholden to an electorate, so that they can continue kind of doing what we're seeing happening now. And my guess is that these strikes won't make a huge difference, and they will carry on. In fact, they'll relish the fight against the United States and its allies in doing what they want to do. They want to see a ceasefire in Gaza, and they want to see the end of a blockade.
Do we know anything about their numbers? I think, obviously, there was mainly targeted at weapons depots and things like that last night, but I think there were 5 casualties, 6 injured. I mean, what are their overall numbers?
Yeah, I think it's quite clear that the US-led coalition, they telegraphed what they were going to do. There were warnings, and then, there were leaks that these strikes would happen. So certainly there would have been time to get humans out of the way, fighters out of the way. But in terms of the numbers, we're talking possibly 20,000 fighters that they have at their disposal. Now, the image, of course, that you have of the Houthis is this kind of ragtag militia, and that kind of goes back to when they were formed in the 1990s carrying aged Kalashnikovs, but they're far more developed than that now. They have ballistic missiles, they have cruise missiles, they have anti-ship weapons, but about 20,000 fighters. And of course, the arsenal that they've managed to bolster is very much down to the Iranians. But they are a formidable force. They're not a force in terms of when you compare them militarily to the United States or the United Kingdom. But then we're not talking about an even conventional war. This is asymmetric warfare. So in that sense, they're formidable. They are a powerful force.
You mentioned that they're kind of not accountable in terms of to an electorate. Obviously, they're backed by Iran. What about other countries in the region? Will they be putting more pressure on the Houthis to de-escalate than perhaps other militia groups in the area because of the impact it's having on trade, which affects everybody, or not?
I mean, I think another way of looking at that is would the Houthis listen? I mean, they are part of the axis of resistance with the Iranians. Part of their, it's baked into their DNA is to resist Israel, which they call the Zionist entity, and also the United States, which they see clearly as Israel's sponsor. So the question really is, will they listen? I think the other thing that's worth bearing in mind is that when you listen to officials in the United States, when you listen to officials in this country, they separate what happened last night from the Israel-Gaza war. That, as far as most of the Islamic world is concerned, the global south is concerned, is either simply untrue, it's misguided, it's disingenuous. As far as they're concerned, that the longer what's happening in Gaza continues, the greater this threat is. And what we've effectively seen overnight is the expansion of the theatres of war. The United States, the United Kingdom are very much heavily embroiled in the Gaza war as far as many people around the world are concerned. I've been to Yemen a few times and done interviews with Houthi officials there, and they will make comparisons with the fighter jets that are being used by the Saudis and the Saudi coalition. They're American bombs, and the bombs that are being dropped on Gaza, Israeli pilots, yes, but they are American fighter jets.
Do just stick with me for a moment, Az, because we've got a soundbite that I might get you to react to if there's time. Well, in the last few minutes, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has given his reaction to the overnight strikes.
Labour does support this operation against the Houthi rebels. It's clear that for some time now they've been carrying out attacks on shipping, commercial shipping in the Red Sea, putting civilian lives at risk, as well as disrupting international trade and traffic and shipping. And so we support this action. Obviously, we need the Prime Minister to make a full statement too.
And he waffles on a little bit. Waffle. He asks a question, he repeats almost the same thing.
The action that the government has taken. Of course, it's for the government to make a statement about it, but the principle is an important one.
Sir Keir Starmer there moments ago. Alex, quick reaction to this. I mean, clearly there is unity between the US and the UK. There are some other nations that supported it too, and there's unity within the UK. Is that something that the opponents in the Middle East will be taking note of?
Well, I think it's quite interesting. Michael Clark, you asked Michael Clark about the fact that the United States, could it have carried out this alone, and why did the UK take part? In international politics, if you can build an alliance, you can build, to a certain extent, legitimacy. So it's very important to uphold that. Yes, we are seeing unity here domestically at the moment, but of course, the longer this goes on, and whether or not the strategy that they've come up with, a military strategy, is effective, those questions become bigger and more pronounced the longer this goes on. Now, I think the big question going forwards is there a military solution to what we are seeing in the Middle East? Now, many people will point out that what's been going on between the Palestinians and the Israelis predates by many decades the creation of the Israeli state in 1948. That is an open running sore. They will point out, unless there is an equitable solution for the Palestinians, you're going to have this kind of inflammatory situation escalating all of the time. So unless you deal with the root causes, I think, the problem will continue. And the longer the problem continues, the questions about, unity and how long the alliance can stay together, that also persists as well.
Alex Trosser, great stuff. Really good to have you here in the studio.
OK, let's move on to Martina. There's a story in The Guardian about AI that's taken your interest.
Very interesting, very important, because we are in election year, of course. So The Guardian found, they're quoting a communications company that's found that apparently more than 100 paid-for deepfake video advertisements of Rishi Sunak, of a mocked-up Rishi Sunak, were found on Facebook. And this is extremely concerning because obviously, you know, we're all journalists, we follow the news really quickly, but one person that might see a mocked-up version of Rishi Sunak online might actually believe that that's real.
And in an election year as well, there's more pressure on to make sure the truth.
And we know that there have been problems with elections last year. I think Slovakia was having parliamentary elections, and in the days before the elections, there were several videos circulating online, and they couldn't really tell whether people actually ended up believing in those videos. So it's an issue that we're going to hear a lot more in the coming months.
Yeah, it's such a difficult one, isn't it? Because obviously there's the government itself is trying to make regulation of AI a priority, but how quickly can it catch up and before damage is done?
Well, we had that AI summit last year that Rishi Sunak convened. I think it was the first one, so it was a success in many ways. He brought countries together that people didn't expect to come, but the actual output was quite minimal. I think we have to question whether it's necessarily wise to constantly consult these social media companies and these online publishers as they are about whether they, what they think about regulation. They are obviously motivated by profit, so the government, I think, has to take a much tougher line and quickly, because we're already seeing this stuff come through on regulating these companies and on AI deepfakes online.
Yeah, and it's an issue globally. We're actually out of time. We got. I'm so sorry to stop you.
Responsible for the loss. I haven't got that money, and I don't know where it's gone.
Well, since the show aired last week, former Post Office boss Paula Venables has handed back her CBE after an online petition reached over 1 million signatures. The government also announced a new law to ensure those wrongly convicted are exonerated and compensated. Well, it's not the first drama to spark national outrage and political change. In 1966, the BBC play Cathy Come Home led to action on homelessness. And then in 1990, the film Who Bombed Birmingham famously helped overturn the convictions of the 6 men wrongly imprisoned for the Birmingham pub bombings in 1974. And here with me in the studio is Leslie Udwin, who co-produced that film. So lovely to have you on the show, Leslie. Thanks so much for coming in.
Great to be here.
And I really want to hear about how your film came about. But first of all, what's your reaction to Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, which has made such a huge impact on the country?
Of course, I'm thrilled to bits. Drama has a major role to play, and journalism, all the work behind that drama that enabled that director and that producer to tell that story. I'm thrilled, as anyone in their right mind is, when they see people who have been so wronged for so long in this particular case have their injustices addressed and indeed overturned. But, it also fills me with a sense of despair. Because are we really going to lurch from one reversal of a miscarriage of justice to the next? You mentioned Cathy Come Home, Anna. That was 60 years ago. That was in the 1960s. Who Bombed Birmingham was some 20 years later, 1989. Sub-Postmasters series is yet another 20 years on, and you can count these dramas that have made a difference on one hand. So for me, the crux of the issue is, how are we going to prevent these injustices? It's no longer acceptable to simply address the fallout from abuse or violence or neglect or injustice or greed or cover-up. It's just not an acceptable way to continue to live. And if we want to be proud of who we are as a nation, if we want to address what values we have as citizens, we have to start in early childhood And we have to address the mindset and change that.
And that's something that you're working on now. I know that you've gone from, you stopped making films, haven't you? You're working for this organisation, Think Equal, which is all about starting life the right way.
Absolutely.
And so leading a good life. And so the hope is that you don't end up with terrible injustices in the world.
And it's not just hope. We are seeing extraordinary results. There are 62,500 children right now in the UK who are learning to grow up and care and be inclusive and empathetic, have self-esteem, learn how to regulate their emotions, learn what fair play is, building a moral compass. This is what we've lost in our world and in our nation. Greater Manchester, but this is so important. This is the crux of it. In Greater Manchester, 80% of the children across the entire region are learning a new subject. You see, we believe, and this is why I've stopped making films, because the difference we're making in the world, we're actually in 31 countries. 4 countries have mandated this program, Think Equal. ThinkEqual.org is where all the information is. 4 countries have mandated this program as compulsory for every single child in the country. Imagine what's going to happen to that society, to that nation of people. That's where we should be going. And I'm full of hope. Both parties are looking at early childhood. That's the gateway for us.
So prevention is your focus now.
100%.
But I'm also really interested in your take on the power of dramas to change minds. And your film resulted in a huge public sympathy and outpouring again, and ultimately the overturning of those wrongful convictions. Why do you think that made a difference when other campaigns hadn't?
Because drama has this unique power, Anna, to inculcate experiential empathy. That's the whole mechanism of what narrative and character do in a drama. You, the viewer, for the 2 hours that drama is unfolding, or in the case of the Sub-Postmasters drama, it was a series, so that was 4 hours. You basically sublimate your own concerns and give yourself over in the most focused possible way to the experience of another human being. That is what makes the difference. And that is why you can be writing articles for 20 years or even doing extraordinary investigative journalism TV pieces like the World in Action programme did of Grenada.
There was a series of documentaries before your docudrama that didn't have the same impact, but it was dramatising it that seemed to make a real difference.
And that's what I argued. When I went to Ray Fitzwalter, who was head of World in Action, this was the genesis of the Birmingham 6 film, I said, Ray, nothing will ever change here until the British public empathise, go on this journey of understanding what it was to have your confessions beaten out of you, to have your signatures forced, what it was to spend, by then I think it was 15 years in prison for a crime you haven't committed, until they feel that and identify with it directly. Nothing's going to change in this case. You can do as many World in Action programs as you like. And he was persuaded.
Amazing. And it was a hugely impactful film. Sadly, we're out of time. But Leslie, it's been such a pleasure to meet you. And
lovely to meet you too.
So interested to see what future dramas are now being planned. Be very interesting.
And education. What is being planned there? That's going to make the difference. I'm full of hope.
We'll have you back to talk more about that another time, but we're out of time now. Thanks so much.
Britain's care homes are failing people with dementia. That's the major concern voiced today by the UK's leading charity for the disease. The Alzheimer's Society is calling for better investment and mandatory specialist training for staff as families up and down the country face heartbreak over the quality of care received by their loved ones. Our North of England correspondent Shingi Maririki reports for us from Sheffield.
Let video see what it is.
Do you know? Just point it to the video. Just point the...
She was just life and soul at party, really. Everywhere she went, everybody loved her. Everybody knew my mum.
Jeanette and Lisa often talk about their mum Rita like somebody they used to know. Not because she's no longer here, but because they're grieving for the person she was before a dementia diagnosis.
When her illness worsened, they were advised to place her in a care home between 2021 and 2023.
Every time I went, my mum was wet through and we were having to ask them to change her. That's why my mum got put in this place, to be cared for, to be looked after, to be clean and dry.
She was also often left in this position, her head hanging low, neck unsupported.
Just on a dining chair, sort of more or less either with her head on the table or more or less just folded in half. There were two carers walking in and out, looking at her like that. But they just didn't seem to, they weren't bothered at all.
Rita also had a number of unwitnessed falls, resulting in these injuries and adding to her daughter's concerns for her well-being. Rita was staying at Abbey Grange Care Home in Sheffield. A Care Quality Commission inspected the home on 20th July 2022 in response to specific concerns raised to them. Country Court, the company that runs the home, decided not to comment on all the allegations in this report. After this inspection, the home remained rated good overall, with the CQC concluding staff there understood how to protect people from harm.
We noticed when we went to visit, he was always in dirty clothes.
Another family who had loved ones at the same home between 2022 and 2023, with their own allegations of how his care was neglected.
We started to notice that the poo was dried on. So when we tried to clean my dad, it was hurting him. He was in pain. And we had trouble wiping the poo away because it was that dried on. It must have been sat in that for a long time for it to get like that. Why is he sat like this? This can't be normal. This can't be right.
This family feels staff at the home were poorly equipped to deal with the needs of the people they were looking after.
I feel that they're not trained enough how to deal with dementia, how to talk to them, how to reassure them, how to make their life a little bit better.
They also say he had frequent falls, some of which they wouldn't be told about.
Some that they used to contact us about, but a lot they didn't.
And it would literally be the next time we visited him, noticing that he's got a bruise or a gash on his head or something like that.
And he used to say, "I'm trapped here. I'm trapped." I do believe if we'd have got him out of there into probably the one that he passed away at, he'd have had more happier days, and maybe he would have lived a bit longer. We'd have had him a bit longer.
Those issues go beyond just this home. Sky News has found that there is no mandatory dementia training for people applying to work in care homes. We put this to the Alzheimer's Society, who told us thousands of people are being let down by a system that needs better investment. They told us dementia is the UK's biggest killer. There are 900,000 people living with dementia in the UK, and although the majority of people who draw on adult social care have dementia, the social care system is not currently set up to properly meet their needs. Care staff need training that enables them to understand the challenges people with dementia can face and to learn skills that can support effective communication. We've also spoken to one person who between 2022 and 2023 worked at Abbey Grange. They also believe so many of the alleged issues at the home stem from poor training.
And it's only because you'd watch other staff and you'd pick it up that way. You don't have no moving and handling experience. There's certain ways you can pick them up, lift them and help them and stuff, support them. You don't get that. So if I'd have gone in and just basically rolled a lady over who'd got fragile skin, I could have tore her skin. If I'd have gone and tried to help a lady out of bed and she'd fallen, that would be my fault because I've not done moving and handling, but they'd make me do it.
This ex-member of staff also says hygiene was an issue at Abbey Grange, sometimes with severe consequences, alleging one resident died after an open wound became infected.
So I'd put down that this lady had got this bed sore and it was non-blanching.
What does that mean?
That means there's no blood supply going to it. It's dying off. But because I wasn't there with her for the next 4 or 5 shifts, when I went back to this bed sore, it broke open. They were telling seniors and nurses, make sure this happens and that happens, but they weren't relaying it to us. But then we won't see this lady for 4 or 5 shifts, so there's no continuity there, and that sore, it just got bigger and bigger. And it got as though you walked onto the unit and the first thing you could smell was this lady's leg.
We've been speaking to the Department of Health and Social Care about the issues we've uncovered. It said all dementia care staff should be receiving training that the government has delivered in collaboration with the care sector. The department also said that all care providers
should be carrying out checks on the competence and skill of their staff.
Happy birthday to you.
In November of last year, Rita moved into a new home, where she celebrated her 77th birthday. Her family says she's healthier and happier, but they are still angry at her home and the system, which they believe cost her 18 months of her life. Shingi Marike, Sky News.